For this video, we will be covering how to duplicate or create a new flow in Switch. Please refer to the installation guide for the steps to open the Switch GUI and the first time setup instructions. For a flow that runs STREAMdiff, we typically duplicate an existing flow and make the necessary changes, rather than creating a flow from scratch. Before we walk through an example of how to duplicate a flow, though, it's important to understand the folder structure that the STREAMdiff flows use. On the server where Switch is installed, you'll find a Switch configuration files folder at the root of one of the hard drives. In my example, mine is on my D drive. You can see the Switch configuration files folder here. This can be on a C drive, an E drive, an F drive. The letter of the drive does not matter, but you will find at the root of one of those drives this Switch configuration files folder. Inside that folder, you'll see there's a STREAMdiff folder, and inside the STREAMdiff folder, you'll see individual folders or folder structures for the various flows that we have created. The idea here is that each folder inside the STREAMdiff folder has the same name of the flow that's running in Switch. So for example, Automated Compare AFP has the folder structure for an AFP flow, and you can see the various other folders here as well. It's important that the name of these folders match the same name of your flow in the Switch GUI. Okay, so for this example, we're going to be using this Automated Compare PDF folder or flow. If you go into this Automated Compare PDF folder, you'll notice there are two additional folders, a Configuration Files folder and a STREAMdiff Projects folder. The Configuration Files folder contains all the necessary files and folders that STREAMdiff requires in order to run a compare. These folders get pulled in when files are submitted to the flow in Switch. And if we take a look at the configuration files folder, you can see there's some various other folders here. The templates folder is an important folder because this contains the INI files that STREAMdiff requires to run a compare. It also compares this SDP or STREAMdiff project file, which contains all the various rules and settings from the STREAMdiff GUI. So when files are submitted to a flow in Switch, it pulls all of these files and folders in to run the compare. All right, if we go back a couple levels and take a look at the STREAMdiff Projects folder, the STREAMdiff Projects folder contains the results of each compare. So for every compare that you run through Switch, it will create a separate folder in the STREAMdiff Projects folder. The STREAMdiff Projects folder will contain the name of the file that was compared, in this case, Statement 1 Control, and it also contains an optional time and date stamp if you have that option turned on in Switch. Within that folder, you'll notice there is a project file. This project file can be opened to view the results of the compare. And then you'll also see that there's a control file folder with the control PDF file in it, and then a test files folder with the test PDF in it as well. So again, for every set of files that you submit to Switch, that Switch then runs through STREAMdiff, it will create a separate project folder in this STREAMdiff Projects folder. If we back up two more levels, there's one additional folder I'd like to point out. That is the Automated Compare output folders. Inside this folder is an output folder for each STREAMdiff workflow. These folders are used to move files back and forth from the flow where they're submitted to the batch processing flow where they're compared, and then back to the original flow so the results can be viewed. Now that we've covered the folder structure, let's duplicate an existing STREAMdiff flow. In this example, we're going to duplicate a flow that compares PDF files. It's important to duplicate a flow that compares the same type of files you want to compare. For example, if you want to compare PDF files, duplicate a PDF flow. If you want to compare AFP files, then duplicate an AFP flow. We'll start by creating a copy of the configuration files folder that we want to use. So if we go back one more level, we'll use the Automated Compare PDF folder since the new flow that we want to use is going to be comparing PDF files. So we'll just right-click on that folder, copy, and then also right-click and paste that in the same location. All right, so we now have our copy of the configuration files folder. Let's go ahead and rename that to the name that our new flow is going to be. So we're going to remove this dash in the word copy, and we're going to put the word statements in here because the new flow is going to be comparing PDF statements. All right, so we now have our configuration files folder ready for our new flow. If we go into there, we have our configuration files folder, and then we also have our project files folder for that flow. It's a good idea that anytime you copy this configuration files folder that you clean up this STREAMdiff projects folder, because that's going to contain all the projects from the flow that you're duplicating. So I've cleaned up all the project files in here, so let's clean and ready to go now for our new flow. Okay, next we'll go to the automated compare output folders and create a folder with the same name there. So if we go back to our automated compare output folders, again, we're going to copy this automated compare PDF output folder and then just change the name accordingly. So we'll just right click and copy there and then paste that and then change this to match the name of our new flow, which is going to be with the word statements in there. So we'll put the word statements like that, and then the word output at the end. So we now have our folder created for our statements flow that we're going to duplicate here in a couple minutes. Once we have our new folders created, we can now go into the Switch GUI and duplicate the flow. Please refer to the installation guide for the necessary steps to launch the Switch GUI. Once the Switch GUI is open, your screen will look similar to this. On the left-hand side of the Switch GUI, you'll see the flows pane. This will show you the available flows. In this example, we're going to be duplicating this automated compare PDF flow. To duplicate that flow, just right-click on that flow and then select Duplicate Flow from the menu. To rename the flow, just highlight the flow name in the Flows pane, and then down in the lower left in the Properties pane, you can enter a new name for the flow. And again, this name is going to match the same name that we've been using for our configuration files and output folders. So we'll just add the word statements in parentheses and then click on Enter. And the name has now been updated. Now that we've duplicated our flow, let's start making some changes. The first change that we're going to make are to the submit folders. These are the folders at the beginning of the flow where users are going to be submitting files. It's important that these folders are different for each flow. You don't want to have the same submit folders for multiple flows. So the first step is to decide which submit options we want to use. In this flow, there are several submit options. The first option matches PDF files by name. So you can drop multiple PDF files into the submit files folder and it'll match them up by name. The name doesn't have to be exactly 100% the same, but as long as there's something in those control and test file PDF names, we can match them up. The second option allows you to submit 2 PDF files in a folder. So you put 2 PDF files into a folder, then just drop that folder into the submit folder. And then the last 2 options are the FTP and the submit point via the web browser. So it's important that you select the submit options that you want to use. In this example, we're going to keep it simple and just use this submit folder option. So to do that, I'm going to just highlight the different submit options that I don't want and click on the delete button. Same thing for the FTP receive, just click on it and click on delete and the submit point. So the only submit option that we're going to use today is this submit folder. So once we've selected the different submit options that we want, it's important that we update the path of this submit folder. The submit folder path is typically on a central location, maybe a network drive or a shared drive, where it's easily accessible for users to drop PDF files. So to update that location, just click on the submit folder. So just click on the path and then click on the greater than arrow and then choose folder, and you'll be able to update the path of that submit folder. Again, a central location is important, so it's easy for users to get to that location and submit files. In this example, though, we're just going to put this on my D drive. So I'll create a new folder and call this submit files. And then click select folder, and we've now updated the path for that folder. The next change we'll make is to the job folder. This is the second folder in this flow. And the important part of the job folder, if we click on that job folder and we look down on the properties pane on the bottom left, you'll see there's a parameter called attach job state, and that parameter matches the name of our flow. This is used to track where files come from so that Switch knows where to put the results after the compare is complete. So for every set of files that you drop into this folder, Switch will attach this name to those files as metadata so that when Switch is done comparing the files in a different flow, it knows which flow to send the results back to. So it's important that we update this job state name to match the name of our flow. So staying consistent with our statements name, we're going to just add the word statements in parentheses, and Switch will now know where these files are coming from and where the results need to go after the compare is complete. Moving on to the STREAMdiff config icon. If you click on the STREAMdiff config icon, this is actually a script that we've written. And this script tells Switch which configuration files to pull in for the compare and where to save the results. So if we click on that icon in the lower left-hand corner, you can see there's a couple of different settings that we need to change here. The first setting is the config folder. You can see where it's pointing to right now, the automated compare PDF folder. We have to change that to point to the configuration files folder for the automated compare PDF statements folder. So to do that, just click on that path, then click on the greater than, and then choose folder. And then we can browse to our D drive, switch configuration files, STREAMdiff, and locate our PDF statements folder. Just double click that, and then select your configuration files, like that. All right, the second change that we have to make is the project repository folder. That's again where all the results are saved after a successful compare. So we'll click on that path, click on the greater than, and choose folder. And again, we're going to browse to our D drive, switch configuration files, STREAMdiff, automated compare PDF statements, and select STREAMdiff projects. All right, a couple more optional settings in the properties pane are the extra parameters. The extra parameters tell STREAMdiff how many pages to compare. So a value of -1 tells STREAMdiff compare all pages. If you wanted to compare a specific number of pages though, you could replace this -1 with any positive number. For example, if we want to limit our compares and switch to 100 pages, you could enter a value of 100 in there. STREAMdiff would then just compare those 100 pages for files that are submitted through Switch. In this example though, and typically we want to run all pages, so we'll leave that set to -1. All right, the next option is called project name. When STREAMdiff runs the compare, it creates the project file and the PDF report and uses the name from either the control or the test file. So using this setting, you can determine how you want your results to be named, either the control file name or the test file name. And there are other ways to rename as well, but these are the two options that you have by default, either naming with the control file name or the test file name. And then the last option is the timestamp. If you would like a date and timestamp added to your results names, you can just select yes or no from this drop-down box. Okay, just to recap the changes that we've made, we've updated the submit folder. So when files are submitted to the submit folder, they will process through. This job folder will give them the name of the flow where the files are coming from. They will then be sent to the STREAMdiff config script where it pulls in the necessary files and folders to run the compare. And then they're sent to the STREAMdiff batch processing input. So this is actually a separate flow that runs the files. Okay, so that concludes the setup steps for the submit part of the flow. Moving down, we can take a look at the results part of the flow. And there are a couple changes we have to make here as well. The first change is to this automated compare PDF output folder. We need to update that path to point to the statements output folder that we created. So again, to update that path, you can just click on the folder and then down in the properties pane, just click on that path, the greater than, and then choose folder. And we can browse to where that folder is. So again, it's going to be in the switch configuration files folder, STREAMdiff, automated compare output folders, and then we can find our PDF statements output folder. Just double click on that and select folder. And you can also update the name. So the name is reflected here in the icon. So if you want to change that name, we can just add the word statements just to stay consistent with how we're naming everything. There we go. All right, the next change that we need to make is we need to determine how we want to view the results. And you can see in this example, we're sending the results to this magenta folder. So this is going to be a results folder where users can go and open the project, view the PDF report. In addition to that, we also have some email notifications that are being sent out. Now, depending upon whether or not you have email set up for Switch, you may or may not be able to use these email notifications. In this example, let's assume that we don't have email set up, so we want to just use the results folder. So like I deleted the submit folders, you can just highlight and delete any of the folders or icons that you don't need. Click on the delete button, and we now have our results. I'm just going to rearrange this a little bit so it's easier to see. There we go. All right, so what happens is after a compare, the results are sent to this automated compare PDF statements output folder. You have the option to rename those files if you want to, or if you want to just keep the default names, those will be renamed with either the control file name or the test file name. They'll be sent to this project file and report folder, which is basically just a pass-through folder, and then sent to the results folder. So because we duplicated this flow, it's important that now we update the results folder, just like we did for the submit folder. So I'll click on my results folder. In the lower left-hand properties pane, click on the path, the greater than button, and then choose folder. And we can select the location for the results. Just to stay consistent, I have my submit files folder on my D drive. I'm going to also put the results folder on my D drive. Click select folder, and we've now defined where we want our results to go. Like I said, typically the results folder could be on a network location or a shared drive where it's easily accessible for users to view their results. It's also recommended that users have full access to this folder, full access meaning read-write capabilities, because when they open up the STREAMdiff project file in this folder, it's going to want to update that file. So in order to open up the results, it's recommended that this folder have read-write capabilities for all users that are going to be opening up the results. All right, the next change will be to the update template part of the flow. And that's going to be in the upper right up here. This part of the flow allows you to change the settings and rules that STREAMdiff uses when the compare runs. You can copy any STREAMdiff project file, which is a .sdp file, into this update SDP folder, and it will update the STREAMdiff settings for this flow. All right, so the only change that we need to make here is to the templates folder. So if you click on the templates folder, you can see it actually shows us the templates folder, which is in our switch configuration files folder, but we need to change that to point to the duplicate copy that we made, which is the statements configuration files folder. So we click on the templates folder, then on the path and the greater than button, we can select where that templates folder is. And again, that's going to be in our D drive, switch configuration files folder, STREAMdiff, automated compare PDF statements, configuration files, and then templates, and then select folder. The last two changes have to do with cleanup. The project repository cleanup script watches the project repository folder and cleans it up on a regular basis. If you click on that script and look at the properties pane in the lower left, you can see some of the cleanup scheme settings. For example, time frame allows you to set either days, hours, minutes, or seconds, how often you want to clean this folder up, how long you want to keep the files. In this case, we're keeping files for 30 days. And then it gives you the watched folder that it's actually watching. And you can see here, it's still pointing to the automated compare PDF folder. We want to change that to point to the PDF statements folder. So if we click on that watched folder path, click on the greater than button, and then choose folder, we can browse to where that location is. So switch configuration files, STREAMdiff, PDF statements folder, and then STREAMdiff projects. And again, this is where the time and date stamp folder gets created every time you do a run through Switch. The time and date stamp is optional, but for every run that you do through Switch, it will create a folder in here with your control and test files and a project file. So we'll select folder there. And then the last option, or the last icon, is the results folder cleanup. So project repository is going to clean up the folder structure. The results folder is going to clean up the files that are located in our results folder here. So we'll click on the results folder cleanup, and the important thing here is to update that watch folder as well. So we'll click on that path and then browse to our D drive where we have our results folder. All right, so that concludes all the changes necessary for this flow. Once all the changes have been made, go ahead in the flow list and right-click on our new flow and select Save Flow. Then on the toolbar, click on the Activate Flow button. If there are any issues with the flow, you will see an exclamation point next to the flow name, in addition to an exclamation point next to the element or folder or icon in the flow that needs attention. If everything was updated properly though, the flow background should be grayed out, like it is, and you'll see a green arrow next to that flow name in the flow list. The flow is now active and ready to receive files. If you need to make any changes to the flow, on the toolbar, just click on the Stop Flow button, make the necessary changes, then save and reactivate the flow. If you do want to create a new flow from scratch, all you have to do is on the toolbar, click on Flow, New Flow. That will create a new flow in your flow list. Then in the canvas area here in the middle, you can copy and paste from other flows, or you can add elements from here on the right-hand side of the flow. You can see the list of the flow elements here. For example, if you do want to add folders to this flow, just click on the folder icon and then drag and drop that into your flow. We'll add another folder here. To connect icons, double click on one of the folders or icons and then drag your mouse or cursor over to the second one and click on that. So that's how you connect elements. And you can see in this flow elements list, there's a lot of different options that you can use to build and create your flows. And everything is drag and drop. You can just highlight, move things around if need be. Like I said, you can copy and paste from any existing flows. So sometimes if that's easier to just copy parts from a different flow, you can just copy them, paste them into a new flow, and then connect them as necessary. This concludes the switch duplicating a STREAMdiff flow video. If you have questions on any of the topics covered or any other support related matter, please contact the Paloma support team. Thank you for your time and attention. Have a great day.